So I wanted to go over some of the work I've been doing in Unreal recently. I decided to start making a bit of a demo slash game to sort of experiment with Unreal blueprints and some techniques I wanted to work on in Wise. So looking at the overview of the map, if we see these blue boxed off areas, these are all reverb zones. So we have separate reverb zones for each of the areas. So we have such as like medium reverbs for the houses, which are located here and here. We have a small reverb zone for this little boxed off area here. And then we also have large reverbs in the more open areas, such as the training area and the sort of courtyard here. These are all being controlled over in Wise. So we have the small verb, the outside verb, and the medium verb. If we also look at the map, we also have some ambient elements dotted around the area. So we have birds and we also have wind, which are all around the area just to give a sort of nice rich environment, sort of ambience sound, which are then being controlled by random containers in Wise. So if I hop back up to Wise, we have these two random containers here, which are the bulk of the sounds in the environment. For the birds, I did add some silence just because when I did have it just with birds, it just seemed too intense. So it was nice to just have some silence in there, just for a bit more of a realistic sort of environment. So hopping over to the player, I've made a footstep system. So as we can see here, we have three different main materials. We have sand, we have wood, and we have stone. So if I give you a quick example.
I need to check the tavern to see who's there. I need to try and hit all of the pillars.
So as we can see, there are several different materials throughout the level. And if I hop on over to my blueprints, we have a footstep system where it also determines whether the player is walking or running. And we have two different Y switches to have just a bit more variety of the character movement. So we have, once that's been determined, if he's walking or running, we have a line trace, which then determines which surface he is standing on. I also have a print string just so I could do, just to check, see if it was working when I was experimenting with it. And then we switch to which environment, which material he's standing on, and then we play the correct switch depending on if he is walking or running. Here's also, as I'm here, this is just, I made a bit of a locomotion because I made all the animations and stuff from scratch while I use Mixamo and to set it all up. And this is just updating with all the player is running, jumping, etc. And over here, I've been using anim notify events just to play specific animations, audio corresponding with the animations, such as the wizard jumping, him landing, which is also being controlled by the materials blueprint down here. So the correct sound plays when he's landing, as well as the fire shot and fire charge, which plays right as he's casting his spell. Talking about the spell, here is the fireball I created for the character. If I go to the viewport, so I have the particle effects, I have some smoke, and I also have some collision sphere as well, so that it can interact with the environment. So if I hop on over to the blueprint, when the event begins plays, so when the fireball is casted, we get a nice fire loop sound effect coming from Wise. And then once the fireball collides with the environment, we then stop the fire loop sound effect, and then we play a fire explosion emitter, and then also we get a nice AK event from Wise explosion posted as well. And that's all like attenuated, so the further away the fireball gets to the player, the quieter, more filtered it gets. So let's give you a little example of that. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is I wanted to experiment with occlusion and try get that working as effectively as possible in the game. And I made this little bar area, which I have people in, and there's ambiences playing and animations and whatnot. So let's give you a little example of that first.
Bloody drunks. Time to train.
So as you can see, it fades out and filters out the further away I get from the front of the door. One thing I did notice when I was making the game and trying to get this to work correctly was in the Unreal bundle as it's set up for the third person character, the occlusion is actually attached to the camera. So when we walk around doors and stuff, it sounded a bit strange because it was almost like the character was like partially deaf or something. So to fix that problem, what I did was added this little blueprint up here, which then overrides that occlusion for the camera, and we are actually using the player controller and attaching the actual player mesh here. So that is the source of how the attenuation works. So now I thought that sounded far better than when it was being controlled by the camera. One thing you might have noticed when I went into the bar, there was a line of dialogue that got played. So if you see these green boxes here, there's a player dialogue up here in our outliner. Highlight these. So I have one here, someone here, and one here. What thing I wanted to try and do is add some sort of side chaining effect, so that when things like the player, or when the player speaks, we have like a ducking of like the ambiences and the music and stuff, just so it's a bit more clear. So let me give you a quick example of that. Let's go over here.
I need to check the tavern to see who's there.
So as you can hear, the music and the ambiences and whatnot all dips out when he's having his sort of like inner thoughts. So when I did this, when we hop over into Wwise, I assigned all of the elements in here, such as the environment and the ambiences and music and whatnot, to their own buses. So we'll hop over to the music bus, RTPCs. You can see whenever the dialogue is being played, which is in this one, controlled by this meter, then the music then dips out a bit, just so it gives it a bit more room to punch through, so you can actually hear what he's saying properly. Same for the environment. If we look at this RTPC, there's also a voice volume dip and also a bit of a low pass as well, just to give it a bit more room. Another thing I wanted to do was add some sort of like first like quest that I've started doing, just to get a bit of practice adding more things into the environment. So as he passes through this box, he says he needs to hit all the pillars. So I added this collision box to this pillar. If we go to the viewport, you can see there's a collision box around the pillar. And when the fireball collides with the pillar, we then get this post-event trigger from Wwise. And also when it gets hit, I also spawned a little emitter just to sort of signify that you hit it, so it sort of sets on fire when you hit it with the fireball, and get a nice little fire effect as well from Wwise. So I'll give you a little example. So yeah, that's the majority of some of the work I've been doing in the game so far. It's been a great experience learning more about Unreal blueprints, not just from an audio aspect, but just from a game development in general. It's definitely given me a better understanding of game dev and the work that goes into it. So thank you.